Hello there, let's talk about design. Before we go into the city skylines part of the video, I want to tell you a small story from my life, so you understand the context of why and how I built this small area in Zanerya city. If you find it boring, you can skip ahead, but I thought to do a different thing than my normal videos and provide you guys a little look inside my life and why this area in the game is so important to me. You see, behind all those city skylines videos that you see from me and others, there is a human who creates them. It's always fascinating to me why and how we create the things we create, as we are shaped by so many different factors, the things we see, the things we study, our history, photos we've seen and places we've been. Now, back to myself, a long time ago, when I finished high school, I wanted to continue my education in university and pursue design. So I applied to the Arts University Design section. Depending on what area you wanted to pursue, for example graphic design, industrial design, interior design, fashion design and so on, you had to take an exam and score high to get accepted. Since I wanted to study graphic design, I had to take an exam in Photoshop. So we had been given a few photos of different random objects like two transparent glass bottles, an old coffee grinder, a piece of see-through fabric, a basketball, a photo of a waterfall, and a few more which I don't really remember. The test was to make a composition with all those that would show the idea of outer space, of no gravity, something like that. I don't remember the exact definition of the test, but it was pretty similar. Anyway, next to me, to my right, was a guy who was already a designer and worked in the field for the past 5 years, a graphic designer. He just needed the university diploma to increase his salary. What he did was absolutely stunning. He took the water bottles, applied the coffee grinder texture on the shape of the bottles, making a big spaceship. The waterfall he changed it into fire kinda, which was at the end of the ship. And with the basketball he created some planets and so on. Long story short, his final composition was absolutely amazing. Now, next to me, to my left, was a guy who treated Photoshop like MS Paint. He didn't use any of the given photos. Instead, he was just acting like a kid who grew up in the 90s with MS Paint, where he took the spray paint brush and made different patterns. Zero use of the given photos, zero similarity with the subject of the exam. 2 days later, results come in. In Romania, we use a rating system of 1 to 10. To pass the exam, you had to score at least 6, if I remember right. However, there were limited spots available for the next 4 years of university, so basically you had to score as high as possible. Guess what happens? I fail with a 2 out of 10, the designer next to me fails with 3 out of 10, and the guy who didn't do shit passes with 9 out of 10. Now that was my first interaction with corruption in Romania. His parents gave an envelope with a few €100 to the right person. So, what now? I went to the second best thing, which was a private university, not owned by the state. Basically, you had to pay for all of the 4 years, quite a hefty amount, and the teachers were decent, but being on the artistic side, they were drunk most of the time. You had to perform really well and constantly bug them with questions and asking for more materials, just so they would show a bit of interest. Of course, I wanted to learn more, and I was annoying and bugging them constantly. So we had different classes: photography, web design, video editing, product design, interior design, drawing and painting, design history, and a few more, which I don't remember, and the main one for which you sign up, graphic design. Anyway, after a lot of questions and poking around for more materials, my teacher gave me a book about a guy called Joseph Müller-Brockmann. I shit you not, that book changed everything for me. This guy is considered the granddaddy of graphic design, and most of the stuff that you see from the early 2000s to the present times has his magic touch, called the Swiss style or the international style, as he was from Switzerland. I was completely hooked and mesmerized by this guy and his works, as he always applied some rules in his works, with nothing placed arbitrarily or random. Everything had to make sense to create beauty. To put it simply, those rules could be summarized as a very strict use of grids in compositions, objective photographs to avoid emotions, and had a lot of importance of rhythm, harmony, and most importantly, mathematical and geometric compositions. Now, since I came from a mathematics background, this seemed extremely interesting to me. And to explain his work better, I will just quote what Mr. Brockman said himself. In my poster, advertising, brochure and other creations, subjectivity is removed in favor of a geometric grid that determines the arrangement of words and images. The grid is an organizational system that makes the message easier to read, and this allows you to get an effective result at a minimum cost. And by the way, for all of you fans of railways, especially the ones who use a lot of the stuff made by the asset creator Revo, who is also from Switzerland, Mr. Brockman is the guy who also made the visual identity for the Swiss railways, which is still being used today. Now let's talk about one of his most famous designs, one that he did in 1955 for the performance of Beethoven Coriolan Overture, a poster with incredibly balanced use of geometric shapes and clinically precise position typography. With the red lines, we can clearly see how the entire composition is designed. The arcs that you see here are moving around the center of the circle based on a module of 11.25 degrees. Also, if we look at the width of the arcs, each one is based on a doubling principle like 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, with the biggest one being 32. Now, if we look at the text and draw a vertical line, we can see that the same length is being used on the top of the poster from the edge to the inner corner of the widest arch. The length of the Beethoven text is also the length of the width of this arch. Also, the length of the width of this arch is approximately the same as the gap between the Beethoven text and the one underneath. If we look at the next inner arch, the width of it is the shape between the Beethoven text and the left edge of the poster. Anyway, for me personally, this careful planning and precise arrangement are absolutely stunning. Now, without making this video 3 hours long, let's move on to City Skylines. But if you liked all this and it made you a bit curious, definitely read more about the Swiss design style, read about the Helvetica font and also watch the movie about it, which is really cool. Take a look at how it is applied in our daily lives and so on. So let's move. Okay, so here we are in City Skylines. This area is directly to the left of the previous districts that we built in the last 2 episodes. And since I had this quite big area to work with, I wanted to do a mall here. The plaza, or let's call it the open area that is in front of the mall, will be made like the Beethoven poster by Mr. Brockman. So I started by choosing a spot for the middle of the circle, and then with the line network, I was doing the modules for the arcs in 11.3 degrees. After each line network was placed, I was, let's say, drawing over them some line decals, because having so many line networks with individual nodes would make things really hard later on to connect. So I needed to have the lines on the ground as decals. Once all of the modules were completed, I took the ruler tool and started to mark the widths of the arcs, and each one would be double in size from the previous one. So 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and then the last big one, 32. And with that done, it was time to fill in the areas. For some arcs, I used the ploppable asphalt because they were too little, like the 1, 2 or 4 segments. Which I arranged carefully with procedural objects, and for the other arcs, which were bigger in size, I simply used the surface network asphalt, as it would be easier to use. Of course, I made sure to carefully keep the same distance between the arcs in terms of modules, and replicate the original design by Mr. Brockman as best as I can. When that was done on the left side, I simply continued with the big 32 size arc vertically, and that would later on it would be the street where the cars are coming from and they can get into the mall parking. It also looked pretty cool and similar to the Beats by Dre logo. Now, moving back to the previous area that I did in the last episode, you can see that I had a small triangle shape of empty land, so I wanted to fill in that area with some residential blocks. Once again, I wanted to maintain the same idea of the entire district and have some verticality, so I added apartment blocks on top of each other and some low speed street that can reach all the apartment blocks. Then I just added some retaining walls to close the area, some ploppable grass to hide the terrain imperfections, and of course add some trees to make the area look a bit better. With that done, now I could focus on where exactly to place the mall area, so I copied all of it with Move It tool and positioned it where I considered would be a good place, just south of the residential area that I just did and close to the river. I added the main building, which is made by the Russian guy Vlad Alex, and added the parking entrance by using a tunnel entrance by Ronix, and then I started adding some red decals around there so we can have like a nice contrast between the black asphalt and the rest of the area. For a nice balance, I added a tree right in the middle of the entire area and also some planters with bigger trees around the arcs, together with benches around the area and some people generators to make the area a bit more alive. Now, unfortunately, I didn't record this part, but on the back side I terraformed the terrain and sunken it a little bit because I got the idea to create a nice little lake, the mall lake. The lake is surrounded with the Japanese retaining wall, and I also added a PO wall on the edge of the widest arc, the 32 one. And just above the lake I added some pedestrian pathways. In the continuation of the mall area, I added another closed-in residential community, but again I didn't record this, although it's nothing complicated and you guys already know how I do this, but you will see this area better in the cinematics. Now I think someone in the chat when I was streaming this on Twitch mentioned that I should add a restaurant somewhere, and that seemed like a pretty cool idea. And after looking around the area and a bit of planning, I came up with the idea of adding a restaurant on the edge of the 32 arc, which will be on the same level, and then on the bottom level to have a small little garden with a pool and I don't know, some nice statues or something. So I made a square extension from the 32 arc surrounded with a nice retaining wall, and then I worked a bit on adding some columns on the side, on top of which I added a glass wall so it doesn't rain on tables and so on. Once that was done, I modified the terrain a little bit to create the pool of water. If you followed me for a while now, you might know that I don't like making those fake water pools, and I always try to make everything possible to have real water in the area, as in my opinion it looks way better. So yeah, after a lot of trial and error and having the area flooded several times, I finally managed to do it, and I think it looks great. Now I found those cool lion statues which I PO'd and removed the body and keep only the head, and from their mouths I added the waterfall prop made by Mr. Kaminoji. This asset came right in the same time period I was working on this area, so it went absolutely perfect with what I wanted to do here. With that done, I thought it might be interesting if people can actually walk on top of the pool area. So again, with PO I added a pathway which is offset every time with a very nice texture that I think fits this area perfect. Then I added some planters on the sides, some nice little trees, and covered the exterior of the pool with some nice vegetation. For the last part I added a few more residential blocks and some parking lots just to fill in the newly created area. And that is pretty much done. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a bit longer than my usual videos, and I know it's different than the normal ones, but as I said, I wanted you guys to understand the context of creating this area and see the logic behind of it, not just the general shape of it. I will leave you now with some cinematics of the area, and if you liked the video, please leave a like to it and subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed, because it really helps a lot in terms of growing the channel. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I wish you all a great week and I will see you soon. Take care, bye bye.